I tightened my grip on the gift bags as I walked up the cracked concrete path to my parents' house. The spring air smelled of cigarettes and my mother's geraniums, a scent I had known all my life, but never stopped dreading. 3 months had passed since my last visit, and I thought maybe carefully chosen gifts might bridge the gap that seemed to grow wider each time I came home. Look who finally remembered where she came from. My father called as I stepped inside. He didn't rise from his recliner, just let his eyes travel from my pressed slacks to the hotel name badge I had forgotten to take off. The fancy hotel manager graces us with her presence. "Hi, Dad." I forced a smile. My brother Jack emerged from the kitchen, beer in hand, still living at home at 32, following Dad into the steel mill. He eyed my outfit and smirked. "Nice polyester blend. Must really impress the rich folks at your hotel." The words stung, but I reminded myself why I was there. Family is family, even when their words cut deep. "I brought some things I thought you'd like." I set the bags on the coffee table just as Mom entered, wiping her hands on a dishcloth. Her eyes met mine briefly, then darted away. "Dad? This is a new insulated coat for your night shifts," I said, handing him the box. For a moment, appreciation flickered across his face, but it hardened quickly. To Mom, I gave a ceramic cookware set she had mentioned months ago. To Jack, a watch like the one he once admired on my wrist. Dad's voice carried the edge I knew too well. "Hotel money makes you think you're rich enough to buy all this. That why you never call anymore? Too busy counting your dollars." Heat rose in my face. I tried to steer the evening toward something positive. "Actually, I have good news. I was promoted to senior manager last week." The silence that followed was crushing. I remembered the first time I had announced I was going to college. Dad had thrown his dinner plate into the sink, declaring that real workers used their hands, not books. Only Aunt Annie had celebrated back then, slipping me money for tuition with tears of pride in her eyes. Now I saw Dad's jaw tighten the same way it had all those years ago. Achievements were never achievements here. They were betrayals. Yet some stubborn part of me still craved their approval. "I thought maybe seeing what the promotion entails might help you understand," I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out my brand new laptop, still on installment payments. I opened it on the coffee table. "This is the proposal that convinced corporate to invest in our property. I'll be presenting it to investors tomorrow." Dad snorted. "That fancy computer won't help when that hotel fails. Tourist towns always dry up." Jack leaned forward, his new watch glinting under the lamplight. "Still trying to prove you're better than us, pathetic." The air thickened around me. My mother clutched her cookware but wouldn't meet my eyes. It was always 3 against 1 in this house. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm having lunch with Aunt Annie tomorrow to celebrate. She's excited about the promotion." Dad's expression darkened. "My sister filled your head with foolishness, made you think you could be something you're not. She believed in me when no one else did," I said, carefully closing the laptop, sensing where this was heading. Dad's eyes followed the movement, slowly. He set his beer down and stood, his frame blocking the doorway. "You think you can breeze in here with guilt presents and take off. Always thought you were better than us, with your pressed clothes and hotel job. Dad, I need to prepare for tomorrow. People are counting on me." His laugh was harsh. "People are counting on me too, at the mill, doing real work." And then, before I could react, his calloused hands shot out and wrenched the laptop from my grasp. "Dad, what are you doing?" My heart pounded. His face twisted with something feral, something that had been waiting years for release. "You need to know your place. Real work is at the mill." The world slowed. He raised the laptop high above his head, then smashed it to the floor. The crack echoed through the room. Plastic shattered. The screen spiderwebbed with fractures. I dropped to my knees beside it. My presentation, my promotion, my future scattered in pieces across the carpet. Jack's voice came cool and satisfied. Now you'll learn what real work feels like. Memories came rushing back, my college application torn in half, textbooks ruined, acceptance letters lost to accidents. This wasn't the first time. It was just the first time I couldn't deny the pattern. I lifted my head. Meeting my father's hard stare, my voice surprised me with its steadiness. How could you? Hotels come and go, he said coldly. Family is forever. But as I stared at the wreckage on the floor, something inside me shifted. Maybe family wasn't forever. Maybe it was time to stop letting them decide my worth. I gathered the shattered pieces of the laptop, slipping them carefully into the bag it had come in, as though I could somehow preserve what was left. My father stood tall, chest heaving with the satisfaction of what he had done, while Jack sipped his beer like he was watching a show. My mother stayed rooted near the kitchen doorway, clutching the cookware box to her chest as though it could shield her from the mess unfolding before her. This had my entire presentation on it, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. The hotel is counting on me tomorrow. Dad's tone softened, but it was the condescending softness he reserved for strangers. I'm saving you from disappointment. That world isn't for people like us. When that hotel throws you out, where will you be then? My chest tightened. People like us? You mean people who work hard, or people who sabotage each other so no one leaves? He flinched slightly, and for a moment I thought I saw fear pass across his face, quickly disguised as anger. Jack stepped forward, beer still in hand, his smirk curling. Dad says the mill's bringing in machines. We could all lose everything. At least if you fail too. We all stay together. It clicked then. They weren't just resentful, they were terrified. The mill was closing in on them. And instead of facing change, they wanted to pull me back down into the pit with them. If I stayed, I'd never get out. I slipped the broken pieces into my bag, standing tall with as much dignity as I could muster. I always hoped we could be a real family, but I guess I was wrong. Dad's voice snapped, sharp and brittle. Don't be dramatic. It's just a computer. No, I said firmly. It's about respect. Something I've never gotten here. I turned and walked out. The bag clutched to my chest. The night air felt colder than it had when I arrived. My steps carried me not toward my apartment but toward Aunt Annie's house. She had always been my anchor, and tonight I needed her more than ever. Her porch light glowed warm against the dark as I parked in her driveway. Before I could knock, the door swung open, and there she was, her silver-streaked hair loose around her shoulders. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of cinnamon and laundry detergent. What happened? Inside her kitchen. I laid the broken laptop on the table and told her everything. She listened without a word, just her hand resting over mine when I finished. She disappeared into her spare room and returned with an old laptop, bulky and scratched but working. She set it down beside the ruins of mine. They can break things, she said quietly, but they can't break you. Her words sank into me, steadying me. This isn't about a computer. It's about respect. Annie nodded, eyes fierce. Then let's make sure you knock that presentation out of the park tomorrow. I spent the night pacing her floral carpet, phone pressed to my ear as I spoke with Hotel IT. Relief washed through me when I learned my files had been automatically backed up to the company drive. Every slide, every chart, every late-night edit safe. You're smart, Annie said as she placed steaming mugs of tea on the table. Always prepared. I learned my lesson years ago, when my acceptance letter disappeared. I remembered that night too well, the mysterious accident that somehow always happened just before my biggest opportunities. I always back up now. She sank into her armchair. Your father did the same to me when I was young. He broke my camera before my scholarship interview. I froze. You never told me that. Some stories are too heavy until the right time, she said softly. Have you noticed these accidents always happen before your big moments? The realization hit hard. She was right. Every milestone: college, my first apartment, promotions, all shadowed by sabotage. My father's pattern stretched back further than I wanted to admit. Annie handed me a small notebook. Your mother gave me this last Christmas. Said she didn't know what to do with it. I flipped through the pages, stunned. It was a careful record of my career milestones, dates, job titles, salaries, all in my mother's neat handwriting. She had been keeping track. Silently, secretly, even while never speaking up for me. She's proud of you, Annie said gently. She just can't show it. The weight of it all pressed on me. But beneath that weight came clarity. They could break my things, but not my skills, not my determination, not my mind. By dawn, Annie and I had rebuilt the presentation on her ancient laptop. It wasn't sleek, but it worked. And the presentation was better than before, leaner, sharper. A story of resilience instead of defeat. I saved it and finally let myself close my eyes for 20 minutes before leaving for the hotel. The boardroom felt cavernous as I stepped in with Annie's laptop. The board members eyed the outdated machine with skepticism. Casey, the director began, is everything all right with your equipment? I set the laptop on the table and met his gaze. Sometimes obstacles appear right before opportunities. How we handle them defines us. I connected the cables, and the first slide glowed on the projector. Crisp, professional, undiminished. Our hotel is at a crossroads, I began, steady and confident. Budget constraints can either limit us or invite innovation. As I spoke, the room shifted. Curiosity replaced skepticism, and by the end, I knew I had them. When I finished, the director snapped his portfolio shut. I was on the fence about expanding budgets. Not anymore. Casey, your team gets the first allocation. Applause rippled, colleagues smiling as I gathered my things. My phone buzzed with texts from my parents, demanding bill money. I ignored it. Instead, I thought of Annie's words. They could break things, but not me. 3 days later, I sat at Aunt Annie's dining table, papers spread out before me like a battle map. Spreadsheets tracked every bill I had covered for my parents over the years. Electricity, water, internet, groceries, even Jack's car insurance. Each payment was logged, categorized, and staring back at me in black and white. This isn't about punishment, I told Annie, who hovered nearby with a mug of coffee. It's about protection. I can't keep letting them sabotage my future while I carry their household on my back. She nodded slowly, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Your father did the same thing to your mother once. Tore up her nursing school application the night before it was due. The familiar twist of grief and anger burned in my chest. Then this is a pattern, and I can't let it continue with me. I clicked through apartment listings near the hotel, pausing on one with a secure building and key fob entry. I need my own sanctuary, I murmured. Somewhere they can't touch. You're treating this like one of your hotel projects, Annie observed with a hint of pride. Exactly, I said. Assess the damage, rebuild stronger. This isn't a family crisis, it's a restructuring. Over the next week, my strategy took shape. I updated HR records to remove my parents as emergency contacts. I contacted credit monitoring services. I canceled automatic payments tied to their household and redirected my deposits into separate accounts. It was painstaking, methodical work, but it was mine. And it was necessary. Annie squeezed my shoulder as she watched me cross another item off the list. You've always been the responsible one. Time they learn what that really means. Her words rang in my ears when my parents showed up at the hotel lobby unannounced a few days later. I spotted them from my office window, Dad pounding the reception desk with his fist. Mom clutching her purse, scanning the lobby as if searching for me. Guests turned their heads as their voices rose. My director appeared at my side, concern etched on her face. They're asking for you. Something about unpaid bills. My stomach clenched. They hadn't just invaded my personal life, they had marched into my professional world. Let security handle it, I said evenly, though my pulse was racing. I've dealt with difficult guests before. But these weren't guests, they were my parents. I watched as hotel security approached, calm but firm. Dad's gestures grew angrier. Mom's tears flowed at convenient intervals, drawing the sympathy of onlookers. For a split second, I thought she glanced toward the elevators, calculating the most dramatic way to force me into the spotlight. The director leaned close. Should I call the police, I shook my head. Not yet. My voice was steady. But inside, I knew this was a new level. They were willing to jeopardize my reputation to pull me back. That night, I signed the lease on a second-floor apartment in a secure building. Annie helped me move in, carrying boxes labeled kitchen and books into the bare space. My furniture consisted of a second-hand couch, a coffee table, and a desk for my new laptop. What wasn't there spoke volumes. No family photos, no childhood keepsakes, no sentimental ornaments. This isn't burning bridges, I told Annie as I checked off another task in my notebook. It's building boundaries they can't cross. For the first time in years, I felt in control. But control didn't last long. The next morning, my phone rang. My mother's name lit up the screen for the first time in weeks. Against my better judgment, I answered. Casey, she said, her voice trembling. The power company called. Since you canceled the automatic payments, they're shutting off our electricity tomorrow. Why are you doing this to us? I steadied myself. Mom, after what happened with my laptop, your father's been so upset. She cut in, her tone shifting. He told everyone you abandoned us. Your cousin Vicky called, asking what she could do to help. The whole family thinks you've turned your back. Her words slammed into me. My father wasn't just sabotaging me directly, he was rewriting the story, painting himself the victim and me the villain. That's not what happened, I whispered. She pressed on, voice dripping with guilt. He says we sacrificed everything for your education, and now you won't help when the mill's closing. The bills, the medical costs. We need you. When the call ended, I gripped the edge of the counter, breath coming fast. My father hadn't just stolen my computer, he was trying to steal the truth. That night, I opened a blank document on my laptop and began writing. I recorded every act of sabotage, every bill I had paid, every manipulation they had wielded. I typed for hours, building a record they couldn't twist into lies. Annie found me hunched over the keyboard, eyes burning. What are you doing? She asked gently. I thought I just needed to protect myself, I said without looking up. But they're poisoning the whole family against me. I have to protect the truth too. She read over my shoulder, her hand resting lightly on my back. Sometimes the hardest part isn't standing up for yourself. It's standing up to the stories others tell about you. Her words gave me strength. I wasn't just fighting for independence anymore, I was fighting to reclaim my narrative. And for the first time, I knew the battle wasn't going to be quiet. 3 days later, they came back this time, dressed for war. I saw them the moment the lobby doors slid open, Dad in his best hat, the one reserved for funerals and loan applications. Mom in her pale blue church dress that made her look fragile and small. Jack hovering behind them, uncomfortable in a stiff button-down. "There she is," Dad announced loudly, his voice carrying across the marble floor. Guests turned. Staff looked up from their desks. "Our hotel manager daughter." The words sounded foreign, too proud, too rehearsed. "Casey. Honey," Mom said, arms outstretched, her face the picture of maternal concern. "We've been trying to reach you." My chest tightened. This wasn't reconciliation, it was an ambush. "I'm in the middle of my shift," I said carefully, keeping my voice neutral. "Do you need something urgent?" Dad wrapped an arm around Mom's shoulders. "Is that any way to greet your parents? We just came to invite you to Thanksgiving dinner. The whole family's coming." His eyes met mine with a challenge. The trap was obvious. Refuse. And I looked cold-hearted in front of my colleagues. Accept. And I surrendered the boundaries I had fought so hard to build. At that moment, the hotel director appeared. "Mr. Miller," she said warmly, extending a hand. "Wonderful to finally meet you. Casey's work has been invaluable." Dad transformed instantly, shaking her hand with a firm grip, his face splitting into a smile. "That's our girl," Mom added with shining eyes. Even Jack chimed in. "We're really proud of her." To anyone else, it looked like a picture-perfect family visit. To me, it was the performance of a lifetime. The director turned to me, clearly charmed. "You never mentioned your family was stopping by." "It was meant to be a surprise," Dad said smoothly. "The mill's closing after 40 years. Times are tough. We thought Thanksgiving would be the right time to talk. Everyone's been asking why Casey won't return our calls." Gasps and whispers rippled among the staff nearby. My stomach twisted. This was exactly the narrative they wanted out in the open, the dutiful family versus the ungrateful daughter. "Why don't we continue this somewhere private?" I suggested quickly, gesturing toward a small conference room. My father hesitated, clearly preferring the public stage, but Mom touched his arm and nodded. As we crossed the lobby, salvation arrived in the form of Annie. She strode through the doors holding a paper bag. "You forgot your lunch again," she called cheerfully. "I swear you'd forget your head if it wasn't attached." It was our prearranged signal. She had spotted their car and come running. "Annie," Mom said, her tone clipped. "Monica," Annie replied smoothly, sliding me the bag and locking eyes with me. The cavalry had arrived. In the conference room, they positioned themselves like actors on a stage. Dad at the head of the table, claiming authority. Mom with her purse in her lap, eyes wide and watery. Jack by the window, arms crossed. Annie slid into the chair beside me, her hand brushing mine under the table. "We're just worried about Casey," Dad began, leaning forward, voice dripping with paternal concern. "She stopped answering calls, canceled the bills without warning. With the mill closing, family needs to stick together." "Perhaps Casey should respond," the director suggested, glancing at me. I opened the folder I had prepared, my hands steady. "This is a record of every payment I've made toward my parents' household over the past 8 years. Utilities, groceries, insurance. Thousands of dollars while I built my own career." I slid the spreadsheet across the table. My father's jaw twitched, but I didn't stop. "These are photos of my laptop. Destroyed the night before my major presentation. Not the first time. My college application torn in half. My textbooks ruined. My car sabotaged before my first job. Every milestone followed by sabotage." The director's brows furrowed as she studied the evidence. My mother's eyes filled with tears, not the calculated ones this time, but real ones. Jack shifted uncomfortably, his facade cracking. Annie spoke softly, her voice steady. He did it to me too. Broke my camera before my scholarship interview. Tore up Monica's nursing school application. It's a pattern. The director closed the file, his expression firm. Mr. Miller, destroying your daughter's property is unacceptable. Not just as a parent, but under the law. If there's another disruption here, we'll involve security. Dad's mask slipped, for a terrifying moment. Rage surged across his face. But then, realizing he had lost the audience, he pushed back his chair and stood. Family sticks together. He muttered. Voice. Rough. No, I said quietly, rising to my feet. Family respects each other. I'll always be your daughter, but I won't be your victim. Silence filled the room. For once, it was mine. They filed out, their plan unraveling before them. Annie's hand squeezed mine as the door closed. My director looked at me, his voice measured but warm. What you just did takes courage, Casey. More than most people will ever find. And as I stood in that conference room, I realized something I had never let myself believe before. I wasn't the weak one for leaving. I was the strong one for surviving. Weeks passed after the confrontation, and for the first time in years, I felt lighter. The constant tug-of-war for approval had ended. Not with reconciliation, but with clarity. At work, I walked taller. Decisions flowed easier, and the gnawing anxiety that had lived in my chest for so long began to fade. The director called me into her office one morning, sliding a framed certificate across the desk. Employee of the Quarter. It read in embossed gold letters. She smiled warmly. The board was impressed with your presentation, but even more with how you handled yourself afterward. That kind of composure can't be taught. I traced the edge of the frame, letting the recognition sink in. Before, I would have deflected, insisting it wasn't a big deal. Now, I let myself feel the weight of it. Thank you, I said simply, and meant it. That evening, Annie and I sat on her porch as the sun dipped low, sipping lemonade. Our new tradition. I made the appointment. I told her. The therapist you recommended had an opening next week. Good, she said, nodding with satisfaction. Some wounds need more than time. I smiled faintly. I also updated my emergency contacts at work. Put your name at the top. About time, she teased, squeezing my hand. We rocked in silence, the golden light washing over us. For the first time, the word family didn't feel like a weight, it felt like a choice. Months later, I stood in the hotel's largest conference room, directing my team as we prepared for a regional meeting. My voice carried easily, confident. Where there had once been second-guessing, there was steady assurance. Maria, make sure catering has the vegetarian options confirmed, I said. Already handled, Miss Miller, she replied with a smile. After work, I drove to the community center where I volunteered on weekends, teaching financial literacy. At first, it was just something to fill lonely evenings, but soon it became a calling, a way to help others avoid the cycles of dependence that had trapped my parents. Teaching others to stand on their own gave me strength. 2. One evening, my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but I recognized it when I opened the message. Jack, can we meet? I need to talk. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but therapy had taught me the difference between avoidance and chosen engagement. I typed back coffee shop on Elm. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. He arrived early, fidgeting with a paper cup. He looked older, thinner, lines carved around his eyes. When he saw me, he straightened. Thanks for coming. I sat across from him. What's going on? Jack. He stared at the coffee. Dad's sick. His lungs. All those years at the mill? His voice wavered. My old self would have rushed in with solutions, money, doctors, anything to fix it. Instead, I let silence do its work. I'm sorry to hear that, I said softly, and I meant it. He blinked, surprised. That's it? No lecture. No, I told you so. Would that help? I asked. He gave a weak laugh, then sighed. I started working at Uncle Mike's garage, taking night classes in mechanical engineering. I always wanted more, but I never said it out loud. Dad would have exploded. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the boy who once dreamed of archaeology books but buried it under bravado and bitterness. That's great. Jack, really. He nodded slowly. When you chased your goals? I was jealous, but I also admired you. I just didn't know how to say it. We talked for an hour not about reconciling with our parents, but about tentative steps toward his own life. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. As we stood to leave, he asked, "And if they never change? Then you build something new," I said, gesturing toward the street where Annie's car waited, her figure visible behind the wheel, pretending not to watch. Family isn't just blood, it's who believes in you. He nodded, the weight on his shoulders looking a little lighter as he walked away. That night, I sat at my desk in my quiet apartment, the hum of the city beyond the window. My laptop glowed on the table, its screen filled with tomorrow's agenda. I thought of the girl who once begged for scraps of approval, who measured her worth by the volume of her father's disapproval. And I thought of the woman I was now, still scarred, still healing, but standing on her own. They could break my computer. They could sabotage my milestones. They could even try to rewrite my story. But they couldn't take away the truth of who I had become. And maybe that's the real lesson: you don't have to carry the weight of people who refuse to see your worth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step away, build new boundaries, and claim the freedom to live your own life. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to life.